Pleasure of the council. Anything else on the calendar? Hearing none, we'll go back to calendar on item number 1, the charter right, Council Kelly. Charter right number 1, that the city manager is requested to confer with the city solicitor and other relevant city departments to consider the pending state legislation and pending legislation in the city of Boston and other actions that would allow Cambridge to institute municipal lobbying regulations. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm intrigued by this idea. I believe in transparency. I think we need to discuss it further. Looking at the proposed regulation, I'm not entirely sure why we draw lines at certain type of lobbyists and not other type of lobbyists. So wherever there is money involved in politics, I think we need to be transparent about it. I'm not sure where the law says we can go, but for example, the Cambridge Residents Alliance, it's a 501c4. They don't have to talk about where their money came from. I haven't been able to access their latest filings. To me, that sort of organization, and there could be other ones out there, also needs to be a part of the discussion about where does money intersect politics in Cambridge, and how best can we ensure the transparency that all of us want so that there isn't money sloshing around having certain things maybe happen, maybe not happen, maybe impacting them, without people being aware of that. So I would suggest we send this to the Government Operations Committee and have a more detailed discussion about just what does it mean to have money in politics in Cambridge.
Thank you, Councilor Kelly. Further discussion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Devereaux.
Yes, well, as a sponsor of this, I thank Peter Sturgis of Common Cause for coming to speak, and I respect the work of that organization enormously. I think this is just a really important step toward greater transparency. I completely agree with Councillor Kelly that money in politics is something that is in our system and the public deserves to know about it. So far as groups, advocacy groups like the Cambridge Residents Alliance, this is really meant to look at who's being paid to express opinions. Nonprofit groups, there are mechanisms for those gifts being disclosed already. Those are disclosed through the Office of Campaign Finance. What we're trying to get at is, a little deeper professional lobbyists. And I'm not an attorney, so I certainly defer to our city solicitor and to other experts in the field about how to define lobbyists. The state law defines executive agents and legislative agents. They carve out exemptions for people for whom this professional lobbying is incidental, meaning they spend either less than 25 hours a year doing this, or they're paid less than $2,500. So I think, there are reasonable models to go on. Other cities across the nation have done this. We can look at their legislation, San Jose, California, for instance. There are plenty of templates to look at, and I think it's a healthy conversation to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Devereaux. Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to respond to Councilor Kelly's comment, not knowing about the Cambridge Residents Alliance, I haven't asked recently, but when we discussed similar topic last term, I asked, and I believe for the year they had something like $2,200, and it all came from members of the residents, which means residents in Cambridge. I totally agree with Councilor Devereaux and I'm pleased that Councilor Kelly believes in transparency, which I've always known, and that's all this is reporting. And that, as you've heard some of the public members speak earlier, that can only make things clearer and more true to what is happening, and it seems so obvious and straightforward. And as listed, we're talking about LA, Chicago, Houston, Philly, Phoenix, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, San Jose, Austin, Jacksonville, and San Francisco. The state is looking at it. Other states are close to approving this. It's about time a city that considers itself very open and welcoming to do the same thing. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councilor Carlone. Councilor Mazin.
Thank you, Mayor Simmons. Thanks to the prior speakers, my colleagues. Seems that we're in agreement that this should be discussed further in a venue like government rules and operations. I think it is important probably to ask, where money's coming from, but in terms of local groups, in terms of for-profit groups, lobbyists, the whole gamut. I would place the emphasis, as Councillor Devereaux said, on those who are conducting lobbying as a personally as a for-profit endeavor. Those who are personally benefiting as a professional commitment and whose obligation it is to meet with elected officials. And this is pretty normal on the Hill. This is, I think, something that is mirrored in many other cities and state Capitol buildings. It stands to reason in an era where local government is looking more and more like higher levels of government, and in an era where there's increased scrutiny on processes for transparency, that we would emulate higher orders of reporting, transparency, and record keeping for those types of reasons. And I personally think that no ill will come of this. If anyone's worried about their own politics or the status quo or anything like that, I don't know why anyone would, but if they are, I would just say that I really think this will be straightforward. I think that to have a list of whom you've met with, those people who represent Sage Cannabis or any other venture that is reputable and appreciated and valuable to the city, those meetings, it will not only be clear to the public that the hard work of pushing something through this body is related to those important meetings, but it will also show that the way in which we use our time as a body is appropriate and is fair. I think in the rare case where you get a Panama Papers or a Snowden leak or something, and a company or a lobbying organization falls into ill repute, I think it just gives us all the more opportunity to stand away from and to walk away from lobbyists who, on the federal level, are a lot more dangerous and a lot more whose work it is to undermine democracy. I don't see a lot of that work at this level, and I think that us clarifying and extending our rules will keep us operating in the clear and will keep us in the confidence of our constituents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Mazin. We're going to go now to Vice Mayor McGovern, and then we'll go back to Councilor Kelly if no one has not spoken on this item wants to speak before then. Councilor McGovern.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor McGovern, my
Thank you.
apologies.
I certainly don't have any objection to further discussion. I think a lot is going to depend on what's the scope we're talking about. If I sit down with somebody who, makes a contribution to my campaign and they work at Dunkin' Donuts, so we're going to call them a lobbyist for Dunkin' Donuts, I think we're already pretty transparent. Lord knows in the last election, where money came from was probably the number one or number two topic that people, tried to make, and I know that we all, report that, and it's pretty clear. So I don't know quite. I guess I have to talk about it more. I think people who are lobbyists are registered. When they donate to a campaign, they have to. It's right there on OCPF that they're a lobbyist for whatever organization. So I'm not sure we're going to, I'm not sure what more transparency we're going to get, but I'm interested in having that conversation. But I certainly don't want people walking away from this thinking that we're not transparent on the council or in terms of where money comes from and campaign contributions and whatnot. And I think I think we already do a pretty good job of it, but I'd certainly be open to the conversation.
Thank you, Vice Mayor McGovern. Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To get back to where money comes from, A 501c4 doesn't have to report donors the same way a 501c3 or a regular election campaign does. So, the NRA is one of those places. Money comes. We call it dark money, or people call it dark money. And the Cambridge Residents Alliance is a 501c4. It doesn't have to say where its donors are coming from. So, and I don't know, having tried to find their most recent report and failing to see how much money they poured into the most recent campaign. And I don't know if it was hundreds or thousands or whatever. I know people got donations from them. I don't know where those donations came from. So my point is, let's be transparent everywhere. We may not be able to do it. There may be overarching federal rules that say we can't attack this issue of transparency and we have to focus solely on the ones that are mentioned, such as professional lobbyists. But I see no reason to limit our scope of transparency to what people are doing in Boston or whatnot. I think we want all the money that's coming into politics to be available for everyone to see, no matter where it comes from. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to clarify this business of the Cambridge Residents Alliance.
If I may, Councilor
sorry.
Devereaux, I do want to defer to Councilor Toomey because he has
I'm
not
sorry.
spoken on this matter. He yields the floor. Councilor Devereaux. Councilor Devereaux.
Okay, sorry. I believe the Cambridge Residents Alliance collected a total of $2,200, which they spent on printing some brochures and that were in support of 5 candidates, including myself and Councillor Carlone and Councillor Mazin, and the 5 of us each reported a fifth of that total to the OCPF. It's very small change in light of donations from people who possibly, if this lobbyist rule were instituted and they had to register as registered lobbyist, A, that would be disclosed, and B, their own individual contributions would be limited to $200 per candidate per year. And the typical individual minimum, as you know, is $1,000. So I think let's get a sense of perspective. This order was certainly not intended to open up any bad feelings. It was inspired by what was going on in Boston and at the state level, and Cambridge tries to be a leader in such things, and so that was what inspired it, not going back to campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Devereaux. I want to close this discussion. We have a very long agenda still yet to go. This is going to be adopted, I assume, and then referred to government operations. So I'm going to close the discussion on this item.
Madam Mayor,
I'd like to close this discussion.
well, I would point out that transparency is transparency. It's the issue, not the amount. But I don't want this to go to the city manager. I want this to go to government operations, and we can have a better discussion about who's doing what where and what we're really looking for, and then send something with more detail to the city manager, because I suspect there are a lot of relatively complicated legal questions about where we have authority over the IRS code, for example, that I would want to have a better idea of whether we wanted that information before we send it off.
Well,
thank you, Councilor Kelly. So what I'm going to do, Councilor Kelly,
excuse me, Madam.
I was talking.
I'm sorry, but I would like to respond to Councilor Kelly.
Okay, but please allow me to finish my sentence. Thank you. What I would like to say, and then I'll open the floor back up, was the way it is written, I believe, Madam Clerk, is to go to the city manager, which I don't think is the appropriate place for it to go. I think it should go to government operations. And so what I was going to recommend, and I will reopen the floor for this, but I would move that once, I'll yield again to Councilor Devereaux, but if this is to be adopted, rather go to the city manager, which I don't think is the appropriate place. I would refer it to government operations. So I will be moving it forward for adoption, and I will move an amendment and then move the adoption and referral if the amendment passes. Councilor Devereaux. And let me just say this. This is not the place to have, I don't want us to get into I was going to say another word, but it's not polite, debate on the floor on this item. We're going to have an opportunity through government operations, I hope, to fully vet it with community participation. So I want you to bear that in mind before we start throwing the gauntlet down. Councilor Devereaux.
Okay, thank you. I only wanted to say that I think all of our orders go to the city manager as a formality and ask him to confer with the city staff, and the relevant city staff that's listed in this order is the city solicitor, who I assume would be the person who would, as Councilor Kelly, advise us what's legal and what isn't. So if you want to send it to government operations, that's fine. I guess I'm not a member of that committee or not a voting member, and that committee has its hands full with the city manager search. So I was hoping that we could get an opinion from the city solicitor about what she advised and how that would work, but I defer to others. Thank you.
Well, I may stand in deference on where all policy orders go. I believe that they go where the majority of the council, by their vote, sends them. So I will put the amendment out. People should vote the disposition on this, and so I will politely ask, is there any more discussion on this? If I hear none, then I would ask that we move on the amendment, and the amendment being, because I'm not looking at it right now, is that the strike that it goes to the city manager, strike the last paragraph, and let's say be it ordered that the recommendation, if adopted, goes to the government operations. Now, government operations can certainly call the city solicitor and anyone else. So, before us now, discussion. Councilor Mazin.
I was wondering if there might be a middle ground. What we've done in the past is an attempt to approve the order as is while also sending to committee. I think the advantage is that the city manager could begin moving the wheels with the understanding that he's not going to solve the problem without our input, most likely, and also with the understanding that we need an opportunity to speak on this in advance and iterate the actual structure of something this large and important. So I would actually move a third option that is just both.
Further discussion on the amendment of the amendment.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I think one of the messages I've been getting from the manager and the staff is that we send him a lot of stuff. We're sending him a lot of stuff tonight. We sent him a lot of stuff at our last meeting. I think we need to be much more intentional about what we ask him to do. And I view the government operations meeting as the opportunity for us to be much more specific about what we're asking. So I would not support that amendment and suggest we send this all to government operations. We can have a much more detailed discussion there about what we really want as a body, and then send that on to the city manager.
Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment, which is to send this order to the city manager and to the government operations. Before I yield to Councilor Mazin, is there someone that has not spoken on the amendment of the amendment before I turn it back to Councilor Mazin? Hearing none, Councilor Mazin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say, with deference and usually with agreement usually with deference and agreement to Councillor Kelly, that in this case, we've yet to put our priorities ahead of us, and that it would not be unreasonable if this is something important to us to ask for the city manager's input. We do indeed ask a lot of the city manager, and I think this is very much on par with the other things that meet the threshold for asking the city manager's input. Given that this is of no lesser importance, I think if this is equally important to Councillor Kelly as it is to me, and if it is equally important to my colleagues as it is to me, then I think it does in fact meet that litmus test of kind of level of importance and level potentially of urgency as well.
Further discussion? Hearing none on the amendment. Now, the amendment of the amendment is that it gets sent, this particular order goes to the city manager and to the government operations. I'm going to ask for the clerk to call the roll. We are voting on to amend the order to send it to the city manager as well as to government operations. If this motion fails, the next amendment under it is that it goes to the it strikes the last paragraph and sends it to government operation, and then if that fails, it is voted as it stands. Madam Clerk.
On the amendment to leave the last paragraph as is and refer to government operations, rules, and claims. Councillor Carlone.
Yes.
Councillor Chung. Councillor Devereaux.
Yes.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Ma. Councillor Mazin. Vice Mayor McGovern. Councillor Toomey. Mayor Simmons.
No.
And the amendment fails with 3 in favor, 5 against, and 1 recorded as absent.
Our next vote, which will be a roll call vote, will be to adopt the order and refer to government operations claims, and I hope I got it all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
To strike, to leave the last paragraph and refer it to government operations. Councillor Carlone.
No.
Councillor Chung. Councillor Devereaux.
Yes.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Ma. Councillor Mazin. Vice Mayor McGovern. Councillor Toomey. Mayor Simmons.
Yes.
And the amendment carries with 6 in favor, 2 against, and 1 recorded as absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We move now to I believe, number